The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the participants and do not reflect the view of any institution any participant is associated with. Welcome everyone back to the Nova Society, and today we're going to be answering an email from one of our listeners who's been listening for 2 years, Annalise from Germstadt, Germany, and she wants to know about the Electoral College. She's heard us talk about the Electoral College numerous times on the podcast, and she wants to know, first of all, how can we fix the Electoral College? Is it even possible to fix the Electoral College? And exactly what is it about the Electoral College that we see as unfair? And then Scott presents us with an interesting conundrum. What would be easier, changing the Electoral College or adding 2 new states to the United States of America? So we're going to have the opportunity to attempt to do a little bit of educating here from our own perspectives. So let's listen in. I'm with Scott and Brooke. Priscilla is out for today. But what do you think, guys? The Electoral College, let's start with that one. My feeling is dump it. It's a terrible idea.
Yeah. I think it'd be great to dump it. I just don't see how that would ever happen. Look, here's I guess the problem that I have with the Electoral College is, in a nutshell, is California gets 54 Electoral College votes. Wyoming gets 3, okay? But California's population is 68 times larger than Wyoming. And that means that every vote in Wyoming is worth 3.7 times more than a single vote in California. And obviously that's unfair. It's crazy. So either you give California more Electoral College votes, or you do away with it altogether if you want to. But the idea there is that small states get a say in the government. If there wasn't an Electoral College, there would be no reason to live there.
Yeah.
What, in Wyoming?
Or, I mean, any of these unpopulous places in the country.
Nice view and no neighbors for me would be reason enough to live in Wyoming. However, no, to your point, yeah, I would get rid of the Electoral College. It's been an irritant, as you say, Scott. It is, and Mark as well. I agree with you. It may have served a purpose at one time and have been fair or equitable at one time. That time has passed, or the present system needs an adjustment. The solution, however, is going to prove elusive, as those for whom the system benefits are unlikely to want to see any changes made and are going to yell and shout, and their voices outweigh, 3/4, 2/3 of the states have to agree to 2/3 have to agree to overturn or to make an amendment to the Constitution. At the rate the United States is moving along toward continued divisiveness, I don't see that we're going to be able to agree. We can't even agree what the problem is anymore, except that we Americans, one another, if we don't agree with one another, that other person is the problem. I don't see that any changes are going to happen anytime soon. Or what about changing the Electoral College so that the proportionality for the state, so that if in New York City, Rochester, and I'm not sure, maybe a little bit around Syracuse and Buffalo perhaps is blue, and the rest of the state is largely red for Republican. So all of New York State's Electoral College votes go to the Democrat invariably, and the Republican gets nothing. If one were to provide proportionality, perhaps that might be a way of it would probably create more of a mess, but it might be more a way of providing more equality. What do you think?
Well, there's 2 states that do that now, the state of Maine and the state of Kansas. It isn't you win it, you take it all. the Electoral College, it should be the popular vote, plain and simple. Then whether you're rural or whether you're from a city or not, your vote counts. We've had 4 times that a president has been elected by the Electoral College who has lost the popular vote. That's not democratic.
No, all 4 of those have been Republican presidents.
4 of them, I believe all 4 of them have been, yes.
Yes.
Have been Republican.
So the Democrat has won the popular vote and the Republican has won the Electoral College.
Correct. And the Electoral College actually is the deciding factor. One of the statements that was made to me, and this was a discussion last night or night before last, was that the Electoral College, and again, going back to the original founding of the nation, it was small states such as Delaware, such as Rhode Island, such as Connecticut. Those small states that were afraid of New York. They were afraid of Virginia, where there were huge populations, and if they had done it simply by population, that had been a problem. And that was to make it fair, so that you had a voice. The fact is that there still has that capacity in the government we have today. Each state, regardless of your population, gets 2 senators. So the voice is equal. It doesn't matter if you're a big state, doesn't matter if you're a little state. That's the balancing point. There is a portion of the government. And let's remember, we've got three branches of government. You've got the Supreme Court, which really shouldn't matter to any one of the states. That's supposedly the judicial body that is unpolitical. That is arguable. That is supposed to make those decisions regarding constitutionality. So if your state is being screwed over by a bigger state and something is unconstitutional, you take it to the Supreme Court, and it doesn't matter to them. Size of the state, none of that matters to them. So there's the first balancing thing right there. The second balancing thing, and going to Wyoming. Yes, Wyoming has some beautiful landscapes. Absolutely. It snows a lot there, though. So I don't know. I'm thinking, yeah, beautiful, but maybe only in the summer.
2 weeks of summer.
2 weeks, 2 weeks of the summer. Yeah, we'll show for 2 weeks of the summer, and that's about it. But when we're talking about the Congress, of course, divided into 2 houses, the House of Representatives, and to Scott's point, it is not proportional. A big state like California compared to a state like Wyoming gets their 3 congressmen. California, as Scott pointed out, it's like it gets a vote in Wyoming is 3 point whatever times more valuable than from somebody in California. But the Senate is divided equally. You've got 2 for each state. That's where your voice can be heard. So if the checks and balances works the way it's supposed to work, then the Electoral College is not necessary, in my mind. But I would have totally agree. It would be difficult to overturn, because even though the founding fathers did put a mechanism in there for us to be able to change the Constitution, they made it very hard, extremely hard, to be able to do something like that. And so it gives me hope that if you can get the amendment process to pass prohibition and then repeal it, maybe there's some hope that it's possible. I don't know.
A lot of people like a cold beer, but they also like having representation in the government and not being ignored by politicians who don't have to bother with their state, which is what would happen, I think, if there was none. It doesn't work, but that's the idea behind it.
So, the idea of changing, the idea of changing the Electoral College would be very hard to do from a political and from a logistical standpoint in the United States. Could it be done? Yes, it could. Are there reasons that it should be done? I think, in our opinion, yes, there are. We should probably get rid of it. Are there better systems that we can have instead of the Electoral College? Yes. The Electoral College still could play a role, but in my mind, cannot override the popular vote. If you lose, as in 2016, which we talk about a lot, you lose by 3 million votes and you're the president. No. Yes, it can be changed. Yes, it would be extremely difficult to do, but there's a possibility.
This is just to play a little mind game here. What do you think would be more possible to get the District of Columbia and Puerto Rico statehood, or to change the Electoral College?
Wow. As we all sit here with blank stares on our face thinking about this one.
I don't even think either one would be possible. And I don't even know if the House of Representatives, for example, to entertain such a question seriously would even be possible.
The reason I ask that is because there's a clear disparity between wealthy states, which tend to be blue states, populous states, which tend to be blue states, and democratic, and the majority of states, I think it's 35 of them, are contribute less in terms of wealth, GDP, and in terms of the amount of people who live there, but they have a greater proportion of power. One way to try to even that up a bit would be to grant statehood to DC and Puerto Rico, which would probably both be blue states, and which are heavily populated, which would be heavily populated states.
Well, I think that would be one reason why a Republican-controlled House, for example, wouldn't want to agree to that. Plus, this is Puerto Rico. Anybody who, I hate to say it, isn't white, I mean, I don't see that they would entertain that. And I doubt that they would entertain DC as a state either. Also, probably because they know that the Republicans are aware that it wouldn't go their way. If they thought it would go their way, then I think they'd be all over it. If they thought that the popular vote would go their way, I think they'd be all over it. Anything that would help them to win, I think, would be that they would be quite interested in, which would make sense.
Well, yeah, they're looking for their unfair advantage. There's no doubt about that.
Which is why there are two Dakotas.
Exactly.
Because in 1898 or whenever it was that they made those states, they wanted more senators. So they, instead of having one Dakota, there are two, and now there are 4 senators from the Dakotas. But those, that would somewhat even things up again, be more fair, and not be so leaving these people in heavily populated areas who have no representation, no real representation in the government.
Yeah, well, I think, and because I don't really see that Republicans are that much interested in equitableness and fairness, not if they deem it to be possibly disadvantageous for them, but better for the American public. If it would allow representation rather than their ability to tell people what to do, then I would very much doubt that anybody would even entertain such an idea. Even the idea, I think, would be quashed pretty quickly. But I think that, which is very unfortunate, because we're not moving forward. I mean, America, I thought, used to be the innovator and the leader and always looking forward, whereas Europe, for instance, was the old country, and the United States, America, was the new, and it was the place of innovation and dreams and the future. And now that doesn't seem to be happening anymore. Now we seem to be extremely disinclined, to use a polite word, even to be roused to thinking about what we're doing. The concept that people can think of is how to be vituperative and unpleasant as possible, and as, in my view, unforgivably rude as possible to whoever's in the White House. The disrespect it merely shows the House member, for example, in a very poor light. I don't know how anybody could support the person. It sets a tone that is unacceptable in leadership.
Right.
And
I don't know why we're dancing around this, Brooke. The idea
yeah,
I think that you're talking about is the fact that when Barack Obama was president, there was a movement to say that he was disqualified from being president because he was not born in the United States, right?
no, that's not.
Birtherism.
No,
And
actually,
and that and that and that now and I was certainly willing to be rude about Donald Trump's presidency for 4 years, and I still
Mhm.
am. And now the let's go Brandon or F Joe Biden
Yeah.
movement has picked up steam, and it seems that whoever's not in the White House, the other team is stridently against them to the point where they're talking about impeaching Joe Biden
Oh
for
yeah, I
policy
know.
for policy differences, not for
Yeah.
any crimes or misdemeanors, because there are none. They're simply talking about impeaching him because of they don't like his policies,
And they.
specifically about the border.
Oh
And
yeah.
now to the point where they're not willing to fix the border because it would give him a victory, an electoral
Exactly.
victory. You know
Exactly. And
that
yeah, no, I hadn't been thinking about the Barack Obama birtherism issue, which now Trump is bringing up about Nikki Haley, which is absolutely not just and saying that she's not qualified because she wasn't born in the United. Of course, she was born in the United States. Please, it's no. I was thinking of Marjorie Taylor Greene,
Mhm.
calling Joe Biden something I won't repeat because I have no need to use such a limited vocabulary.
Right. Well,
But
she's an equal opportunity offender because now she's going after Mike Johnson because she's calling him a rhino Democrat and wants to vacate his seat and have another
yeah,
vote, another whole round of votes to find somebody who could be the Speaker of the House,
yes,
who
yes,
represents her beliefs
yes,
more. So, I mean, I hope that actually happens because it'd be a lot of fun. But it certainly has led to this Congress being the worst Congress of all time in that they've accomplished nothing. But
yeah.
just to get back to like the Electoral College for a second and polling and things like that, I think the latest that I've seen was that 53% of Americans prefer to have a direct popular vote, and 43% want to keep the status quo, the Electoral College. Obviously, this is this is because in two of the last five presidential elections, the candidate winning the popular vote lost the Electoral College. So, this is the last chance that they have of holding on to the presidency. If we went to straight popular vote, they would never. I don't think that there would ever be another Republican elected president, and I think they know that.
Yeah,
And
I'm sure they do. They
I
do.
think you also have to look at the fact. Now, back to your original question: would it be easier to change the electoral college, or admit Puerto Rico and D.C. as a state? So, as you were talking, I'm going through the numbers. Of course, Puerto Rico has 3.1 million people. Wyoming has 600,000. North Dakota 800,000, and South Dakota, because it isn't as cold, 900,000. Combine those three states together, they only have 2.3 million people. That's all they have, less than the population of Puerto Rico. Also, less than the population of many of the major cities: Houston, Chicago, Los Angeles. I believe San Francisco would beat them
New
out.
York,
New
certainly.
York. Well, New York's kind of one of those funny ones because you kind of divide it up by the boroughs, and they kind of like sometimes they lump it all together and say 14 million, and then they don't lump it all together, and then you got Yonkers and whatever. But I
Yeah,
mean, but
and
everybody
then
knows that New York's a massive city. Washington D.C. 610,000. So
right,
Washington D.C. has more people than the state of Wyoming.
Right.
right.
And doesn't have proper
Doesn't have
representation.
proper
Doesn't
representation. I think
correct.
that probably it would be easier. I'm going to split the difference here. It would be easier to admit Puerto Rico as a state. I think that is a doable thing. DC, maybe not as much. I'm going to say if we look at the numbers and we look at population, we look at the way this is set up. I mean, Wyoming, North Dakota, and South Dakota don't have the same population as my home state now, South Carolina, which has 4.2 million people. I mean, it's truly, if we're talking about numbers, and we have supported Puerto Rico for so long, they really should be a state.
Yes, they should.
So
If
I
they-
heard somebody argue that the problem was you'd have to put another star on the flag and it would not look right. I did hear that. I did hear that. Somebody came out. It was one of the politicians. Yes, but we'd have to redesign all those flags, and then there had to be recalls. And I was like, oh my gosh, you got to be kidding me. So yes, so they admit
it's been tried 700 times. Apparently, over the last couple of centuries, to eliminate or seriously even modify the Electoral College. In 1934, it fell 2 Senate votes short.
Oh.
In 1979, it fell short by 3 votes in the Senate. It was not the House, by the way.
Who controlled the houses at that time, Scott?
Well, in 1979, actually, I should be able to figure that one out. In 1979, because I was here.
I think we all were.
In 1979, I want to say the Republicans had the Senate and the Democrats had the House. But I may be mistaken.
I don't know. Ronald Reagan was president, wasn't he? Or was it Carter?
Carter was still the president.
That was the 96th Congress.
Okay.
Just hey, I thought that was pretty good. Jimmy Carter.
I think Tip O'Neill was probably the had the House, and
both chambers retained a Democratic majority.
Okay.
Oh, we still couldn't do it.
Still couldn't get it done.
Wow, man.
Yeah, it's hard to do. So you need 2/3 of the House and the Senate, both, and you need 38 out of the 50 states. And that means if you get 38 out of the 50 states, you can change the electoral. You can make an amendment. You can change the Electoral College or get rid of it. But it's not going to happen because the states that you would need want it, and that's all there is to it. It's not going to change. Now, what some states have done is adopt the National Popular Vote Interstate Compact. 15, I believe, and the District of Columbia have said that it's a multi-state agreement. Their electors are to vote for the winner of the nationwide popular vote, even in states where the candidate loses the popular vote in their state.
Wow. Okay.
So we haven't reached enough states to make that a real remedy for the Electoral College. But it's the closest that we've gotten recently. I just want to see who those states are: Delaware, Hawaii, Rhode Island, Vermont. So there's a couple of small states in there, right? Rhode Island and Vermont. I think Rhode Island is fairly popular.
Hawaii's not very big.
All right. Connecticut, Colorado, Maryland, Massachusetts, Minnesota, New Jersey, New Mexico, Oregon, and Washington.
Okay.
And California, Illinois, New York, and the District of Columbia.
So I'm looking at your list there. How many red states are in that list? Oh, here's a surprise. Not one. Not a single one.
Right. Yep.
So until you get a red state in there, I mean, this is a nice promise that they made, but who's going to win in Maryland, Massachusetts, Colorado, Connecticut, and all these other states. That it's going to be the Democrats going to win. So, I mean, it's not like it was Ohio who made this, who was in this pact, and, the Republican won, and they said, nope, but the Democrat won the popular vote. We're giving our electors to the popular vote winner. There'd be a lot of hooting and hollering over that.
Yeah, no Pennsylvania, no Wisconsin.
Right. Right. That Michigan could get there. Pennsylvania possibly could get there.
Mm-hmm.
That would be interesting. Not Ohio. I'm not really sure about Wisconsin. But that would be something of a remedy.
Mm-hmm.
To make the national popular vote more powerful.
I'm trying to, really think about this because it's an interesting idea. I'm wondering if it's legal for them to do that. I'm wondering if constitutionally they could do it. That's something I'm going to have to really sit down and look up and really look at. Can a state who elects someone in their popular vote, let's take Pennsylvania, for instance. The Republican wins by 1 million votes, but the Democrat wins the overall popular vote by 5 million. Can Pennsylvania actually say, no, we're going to give our electoral votes from our state to the overall popular vote and completely ignore our voters in our state?
So if you're talking about the U.S. Constitution, the answer is yes. I believe the answer is yes. The Constitution doesn't tell states how to award their votes, their electoral votes, right? That's how Maine and it's Nebraska. I think you said Kansas
Right.
earlier. Maine and Nebraska have rejected the winner take all and allocate votes on the congressional districts, right?
Right.
They're allowed to do that because the Constitution doesn't spell out how you can allocate your electoral college votes. So they could do it. It's possible that Michigan would get there. I think Minnesota was already on the list. I'm not even sure that I think Minnesota is a Rust Belt state. And it's certainly possible that Pennsylvania could get there. Don't think there's any chance of Ohio ever doing it. But that would be, again, that would be the closest thing that you would have to fairness as far as the Electoral College is concerned for reflecting the popular vote. It's an interesting movement that's obviously, as we've said, stuck in blue states right now. 72% of Democrats want the Electoral College gone. 30% of Republicans do. So it makes sense that we would want that. But I like, how many electoral? Do you know how many South Carolina has? Is it 3 or 4? Let me ask you another question. Why is there a North and a South Carolina? Do you know that?
All right, I'm going to give you the real answer. I have no idea.
Okay, good. I know why there's a North and a South Dakota.
People here have said why there's 2, but as to why they divided up into 2,
probably had something to do with slavery in North and South Carolina. So going into the 2024 election, like we know what happened in 2020, that there were unfaithful electors. Different slates of electors were recruited by Donald Trump after he had found out that he had lost, and that these electors, in some cases illegally, decided to get together and vote in their states for Donald Trump as president rather than the winner of both the popular and the Electoral College election.
Right.
It was Joe Biden, and that they were they had come here on January 6th with the idea that Congress was going to throw out the electors.
Yeah, Mike Pence was
from a couple of states, right?
And Mike Pence was genuinely considering not even going and not discharging his constitutional duty.
So, fun fact: South Carolina has 9 electoral votes.
Wow, that's a lot of votes.
They do. Connecticut only has 7.
Mm-hmm.
Which I kind of thought Connecticut would be more than that. They have the same as Oklahoma. Those that have 3: Wyoming, Vermont, South Dakota, North Dakota, the District of Columbia, Delaware. That was kind of a surprise to me, and Alaska. So those are the ones with the least amount of electoral votes. And when you look at that group there, there's a lot of red states. Hawaii, of course, is Democratic. Idaho is definitely red. Maine splits. Montana's red. New Hampshire is kind of purple at this point in time. Rhode Island's blue. West Virginia's dead red. Alaska's red. Delaware is blue. District of Columbia is blue. North, South Dakota are both red, as is Wyoming. And Vermont, I think Vermont really is more on the purple side nowadays.
Right, and the voters in those states are overrepresented.
Yep, they are definitely overrepresented. So my thing would be is I think you could get Puerto Rico in. DC, I don't know. maybe. But I think it would be getting both of them in would still be easier than trying to get the Electoral College changed over. I don't think you'll ever see that go away. I don't think that'll
Interesting.
happen.
And we've seen this. We see this time and time again in voting. How do you say it? The prosperous parts of America is about 15 states, and they have 30 senators, where less prosperous areas have 35 states with 70 senators. There's a mismatch there between economic activity, population, and power. And we're continually run by states that don't have people in them. And states that are populous, and wealthy are constantly blocked by smaller states in the areas. A friend of mine hates when I say flyover country, but that most people only know from looking out the window of an airplane and going, wow, there's nothing going on down there.
Yeah. When you fly into New York or you fly into Boston, you can't say that. There's
Right.
no doubt you cannot say, oh, gee, nothing going on down there. Well, so hopefully, Annalise, we've answered some of your question about this. Probably made it more confusing. I know that the Germans, they do not have such a system as this. The system is quite a bit different, and I'm reminded of it every day when Dieter comes over to have a beverage. In fact, he asked a question that he would like. So we will address in probably a future podcast, because he has some questions. And one question he has: why do Americans hate America so much? That was his question. And I said, oh, that we're going to have to devote an entire episode to that one, because that's his impression.
Is it? Yeah. There's a psychological effect. If you tell married couples, boy, you guys are perfect together, they kind of start pointing out all the differences that they have and problems that they have together. But if you say to the same couple, boy, you two really shouldn't be together at all, you're so different, they sort of go out of their way to highlight all the things that they have in common and why they get along so well.
Right.
So there's a contrary nature of people that I think goes into Americans hating America.
Absolutely.
If you don't have to fly a flag off the back of your car to prove that you love America.
No,
but some people do.
You do not. You do not.
Sure, you
and
see them all the time.
Some people actually see it as that's what's necessary. It's a flag, and that's their entire identity. And the fact is it's not. All right, guys. Well, it was fun. So I guess we will talk to you again. So you guys take care. Scott, make sure you know what time it is. And we'll be in good shape.
Now
Brooklyn,
you're making it different times all the time.
And then tell me, oh, I don't have it. All right, guys. Good talking to you. We'll talk to you again next week.
Yes.
Right.
Take
Have
care.
A great
Talk
weekend.
about the S&P 500 next week. Just hit an all-time high today.
The Trumpy is going to say, well, it's on the fumes of my administration.
The fumes. Right.
And blah, blah, blah.
Oh, yeah. All right. We'll talk to you. You guys take care.
Yeah.
So that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of the Phoenix Research Institute. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this episode, the Journal of Interdisciplinary Conflict Science. The JCIS is an open journal for upcoming scholars. The JCIS is currently accepting article submissions on an ongoing basis. The JCIS is a publication of Nova Works, a scholarly depository at Nova Southeastern University. A link to the journal is in our description. We'd also like to thank our podcast partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, who is our editing partner, and Podkite, who does all of our analytics. We'd also like to thank iHeartRadio, where people get their music and podcasts, Apple iTunes, the largest source for music and podcasts on the internet, Spotify, the most popular source for the Nova Society. The Nova Society is available on all these and other quality platforms mentioned in our description. We'd also like to thank our listeners. Without you, the Nova Society would not be possible. If you have a comment, a question, or would like to be a guest on the Nova Society, we can be reached at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. Always remember, the power of society is knowledge. So for Dr. Scott Gershwer, Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Priscilla Hobbs, and all of us here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Be well, and we hope to see you again next time.